Space was silent, but the silence was a lie. Far beyond the edge of known star maps in a region the old star charts called the Velkar Cluster, a small fleet was dying. 5 ships, once proud and strong, now floated like broken toys in the dark. Fire crawled along their metal hulls. Sparks flew from broken engines and thin lines of oxygen leaked out into space, disappearing forever. Inside the largest ship, the Selene, the air was thick with smoke. Alarms screamed from every wall. Red lights blinked like a heartbeat that was about to stop. Wires hung from the ceiling like dead vines, and water dripped from a broken pipe onto the floor, mixing with blood. Captain Ieth Doral of the Velkari people stood at the center of the chaos. Her 4 eyes, usually calm and steady, were wide with fear. Her silver skin, which normally shined like moonlight, was pale and covered in ash. She gripped the edge of her control chair so hard that her claws left marks in the metal. "Report," she said, her voice shaking but still trying to sound strong. A young officer, barely out of training, turned to her, his voice cracked. "Captain, we have lost 3 engines, shields are gone. We cannot jump to hyperspace, we cannot run." "And the enemy?" Ieth asked. The officer's hands trembled over his console. "Still coming, 50 ships, maybe more. They will reach us in less than 10 minutes. Ieth closed her eyes for a moment. Just a moment. She had led this science convoy for 6 years. They were not soldiers. They were explorers, scientists, teachers. They had come to this quiet part of space to study a strange energy signal. Nothing more. They had no weapons worth speaking of, no army, no defense. And now, out of nowhere, an enemy fleet had appeared, an enemy no one recognized. Ships shaped like black thorns, moving in perfect silence, striking without warning. In 1 hour, they had turned a peaceful research mission into a graveyard. "Captain," the young officer said again, "what do we do?" Sheth opened her eyes. She looked around the bridge, at her frightened crew, at the flickering lights, at the smoke curling near the ceiling. She thought of her daughter back home, waiting for her to return. She thought of all the ships behind her, filled with families, teachers, children who had come along to learn about the stars. There was only one thing left to try, one idea that every part of her mind screamed against, one call that her people swore, generations ago, they would never make. "Open a channel," she said quietly. "Wide broadcast, every frequency." The officer's 4 eyes went wide. "Captain, you don't mean—" "I do. But Captain, they are the Deathworlders. We swore never to call them. Our elders said it is worse to owe them a debt than to die free." Ieth's voice grew sharp. "Would you rather die free, or would you rather every person on these 5 ships live, even if it costs us pride? Open the channel now." The young officer's hand shook, but he obeyed. He typed quickly, and a small light blinked on his console. "Channel open, Captain. All frequencies. Any ship in range will hear it." Ieth stood straight. She smoothed the front of her uniform, even though it was torn and burned. Some habits do not die, even in the worst moments. She looked into the small camera lens above her chair, and for the first time in her life, she prepared to say words her people had never spoken aloud in public. "This is Captain Ieth Doral of the Velkari science vessel Selene," she said, her voice steady now, carrying across the stars. "We are under attack by an unknown enemy. Our shields are down. We cannot escape. We have women, children, and unarmed scientists aboard 5 ships. We do not know who else can hear this message. We are calling for help. We are calling the humans. We are calling the Deathworlders." She paused, and for a moment the whole bridge went silent. Even the alarms seemed to fade into the background. She continued, "If any human ship can hear this, please, we beg you, help us." She closed the channel. Her hands were shaking now. She sat back in her chair and looked at her crew. "It is done," she whispered. "Now we wait, and we fight for every second we have left." Far away on the old star maps that every young Velkari studied in school, there was a warning drawn in red letters across a certain part of the galaxy. "Do not disturb human space." Every child learned the story of the humans, how they were once a small, weak species from a tiny blue planet, how their world was full of danger, storms, diseases, monsters in the deep ocean, wars among themselves. And yet somehow, they survived. Not just survived, but grew strong. Terribly strong. The galaxy had a word for species like this. Species that came from worlds so dangerous that only the toughest life could survive there. They were called Deathworlders, and humans were the most feared Deathworlders of them all. Stories said humans did not run from danger. They walked toward it. Stories said a human could survive wounds that would kill any other species 3 times over. Stories said human ships did not retreat, even when the odds were impossible. Some stories were probably exaggerated, campfire tales meant to scare young children into behaving. But no one really knew for certain, because very few species had ever seen humans in action. Humans mostly stayed quiet, kept to themselves, traded fairly, and rarely got involved in the affairs of other worlds. Until someone called for help, 200,000 kilometers away, a single human ship moved silently through the dark. Its name was the Second Chance. A scout and rescue vessel, small compared to a warship, but built tough, built to survive the worst. Inside the ship was quiet. Soft blue lights lit the control room. A low hum came from the engines, steady and calm, like a sleeping giant. At the front of the room, a woman sat with her boots resting on the edge of the control panel, reading something on a small screen. Her name was Captain Maria Reyes, 38 years old, with short, dark hair and tired eyes that had seen more than most people would see in 10 lifetimes. Behind her, a large man named Chief Engineer Sam Okafor was fixing a loose panel near the wall, humming a quiet tune to himself. In the corner, a young pilot named Ben sat half asleep in his chair, waiting for his shift to end. Then, a soft beep echoed through the room. Maria's eyes moved to the screen without much hurry. "Ben, we got something." Ben jumped up, rubbing his eyes. "What is it?" "Distress signal," Maria said, sitting up straight now. "Wide broadcast, not encrypted. Sounds like it was sent in a hurry." Sam walked over, wiping grease from his hands with a cloth. "Who's calling?" Maria played the message. Ieth's voice filled the room, shaking but proud, speaking of an unknown enemy, of 5 ships dying, of women and children trapped with nowhere to run. And then came the final words. The ones that made Ben's mouth fall open. "We are calling the humans. We are calling the Deathworlders." The room went quiet for a second. Ben looked at Maria. Did she just call us that?" Sam laughed quietly. Not because it was funny, but because it always struck him strange hearing outsiders talk about humanity like they were monsters from an old story. Guess word really does travel fast out here. Maria's face did not show fear. It did not show excitement either. Just a calm, steady focus, the look of someone who had done dangerous things many times before and knew exactly how to handle them. She stood up from her chair. "Ben, plot a course. Fastest route possible. Captain, that signal came from deep in a war zone. We don't even know who's attacking them." "Doesn't matter," Maria said simply. "It's 50+ unknown hostile ships, according to her message." "Still doesn't matter," Maria repeated, walking toward the center of the room. "Someone is calling for help. We are close enough to answer. We answer." Sam crossed his arms. "You know this could be a trap. Some pirates like to use fake distress calls." Maria paused for a moment, thinking it over. She was careful, not reckless. "Ben, scan the signal pattern. Check if it matches known Velkari communication style." Ben typed quickly. After a few seconds, he nodded. "It's real, Captain. The signal structure matches Velkari tech exactly. This isn't fake." Maria nodded once. "Then we go." She walked to a small metal locker on the side of the room and pulled out a simple silver band. She placed it on her wrist. It hummed softly as it connected with the ship's system. Sam saw this and sighed. He knew what it meant. It meant Maria was preparing for real combat, not just a rescue mission. "You really are going to dive right into a war zone with one ship," Sam said, shaking his head but already moving toward his own gear. "They didn't have anyone else to call," Maria said quietly. "That should tell you how bad things are for them." Ben's hands moved fast across the controls, plotting the fastest, most dangerous route through the sector. "Course set, Captain. We can be there in 11 minutes if we push the engines past safe limits." Push them, Maria said. That could damage the ship. Ben, Maria said, turning to look at him directly, her voice calm but firm. Somewhere out there, a bunch of scared kids are floating in a dying ship, waiting for someone, anyone, to come help them. We are the only ones close enough. We're going. Push the engines. Push the... Ben swallowed hard, then nodded. Yes, Captain. The engines of the Second Chance roared to life, a deep sound that shook the walls gently. The ship turned in space, aiming straight toward the heart of the danger. Outside the front window, stars blurred into thin streaks of light as the ship surged forward at incredible speed. Inside, Sam checked the weapon systems, quiet but focused now. No more jokes, no more humming. Ben kept his eyes locked on the controls, sweat forming on his forehead, despite the cool air of the ship. And Maria stood in the center, watching the growing dot on the radar screen that marked their destination. A cluster of dying ships surrounded by dozens of enemy vessels. She had done dangerous rescues before. She had flown into storms on hostile planets. She had pulled survivors from crashed ships in the middle of asteroid fields, but something about this felt different. 50 unknown hostile ships was no small number. Whatever was attacking those Velkari ships, it was strong enough, bold enough to hunt down a group of unarmed scientists without fear. Whoever you are, Maria thought, watching the radar, you're about to learn why nobody in this galaxy wants to mess with a Deathworlder. Back on the Solene, things had grown worse. Fire had spread to a second section of the ship. More alarms blared, and the shaking grew stronger as enemy weapons struck the outer hull again and again. Edith held onto her chair as another explosion rocked the bridge, sending sparks flying across the room. Captain! Enemy ships closing in. They will reach firing range in 3 minutes, the young officer shouted over the noise. Hyeth looked at the small screen showing the enemy fleet. Dark, thorn-shaped ships moving in perfect formation. Silent, patient, like predators who knew their prey could not escape. She felt a cold fear settle in her chest, not just for herself, but for everyone counting on her. Did anyone answer our call? She asked, though she already feared the answer. The officer checked his console, shaking his head slowly. No response yet, Captain. Maybe no one heard us, maybe... Suddenly a small light blinked on the console. The officer's eyes widened. Wait! Captain, we have a response. A ship confirms it received our signal. It says, help is coming. Edith's heart skipped. Human? The officer nodded slowly. Yes, Captain, human ship, call sign Second Chance, ETA 11 minutes. Relief and fear mixed together in Edith's chest. 11 minutes felt like forever when explosions were shaking her ship apart. But it was something. It was hope. She turned to her crew, trying to steady her voice. Hold the line. Help is coming. We just need to survive a little longer. Outside, the enemy fleet grew closer, dark shapes cutting through the stars like knives. The scientists and families huddled in the lower decks of the ships could feel every impact, every shake, every explosion. Children cried quietly in their parents' arms. Old scientists who had once studied peaceful stars now prayed to whatever gods they believed in, hoping the stories about Deathworlders were true, hoping that somewhere out there, a human ship truly was racing toward them at incredible speed. On the bridge, Edith watched the countdown timer on her screen. 11 minutes turned to 10, then 9. The enemy ships grew closer with every passing second, their weapons charging, ready to fire the final blow. Captain, enemy ships entering firing range, the officer said, his voice trembling. Edith grabbed the edge of her chair, bracing herself. Everyone hold on. The enemy ships fired. Bright beams of energy shot across space, heading straight for the helpless Velkari fleet. Edith closed all 4 of her eyes, waiting for the impact that could mean the end of everything. But then, in the very last second, something incredible happened. A streak of light tore across the battlefield faster than anything the enemy fleet expected. It moved between the incoming attacks and the Velkari ships, and for one brief, blinding moment, the entire battlefield lit up in a flash of white light. When the light faded, the enemy beams had been stopped, blocked completely by something that had appeared out of nowhere. Edith opened her eyes slowly. Her mouth fell open in shock. A single ship, small compared to the enemy fleet but glowing with power, stood between them and death. Its hull was scratched and worn from countless battles, but it stood firm, unmoving, like a wall that refused to fall. On the bridge of that ship, Maria Reyes looked at the enemy fleet through her front window. Her eyes were calm, focused, and just slightly narrowed, the look of someone who had just walked into a fight and had absolutely no plans of losing. She reached forward and opened a channel to the Velkari ships. "This is Captain Maria Reyes of the human vessel Second Chance," she said, her voice steady and sure. "We heard your call. Hang in there. We've got you now." On the Solena's bridge, Edith stared at the screen in stunned silence. Tears filled her eyes, relief crashing over her like a wave. But even as hope filled her heart, a new fear crept in. Because the enemy fleet, 50 ships strong, was now turning its full attention toward the single human ship that had dared to stand in its way. Edith's voice came out as a whisper. "By the stars, what have we just called down upon this battlefield?" Silence fell over the battlefield. But it was not a calm silence. It was the kind of silence that comes right before a storm, the kind where every creature holds its breath, waiting to see what happens next. On the bridge of the Second Chance, Maria Reyes stood tall, her eyes fixed on the enemy fleet ahead. 50 dark, thorn-shaped ships floated in perfect formation, silent, patient, like predators sizing up new prey. A moment ago, they had been ready to destroy 5 helpless Velkari ships. Now their attention had shifted. Every sensor, every weapon, every eye among that fleet was locked onto one small human vessel. Behind Maria, Ben's hands trembled slightly over the controls. "Captain, they're all looking at us now." "Good," Maria said calmly. "Better us than them." Sam walked up beside her, arms crossed, studying the enemy ships on the screen. 50 ships, Captain. We don't even know what they're made of, what weapons they carry, nothing. We're flying blind here." "Then let's find out," Maria said. She reached forward and opened a comm channel, not to the Velkari but to the enemy fleet itself. Her voice was steady, almost bored, like she was talking to a shopkeeper instead of an army ready to kill her. "This is Captain Maria Reyes of the human vessel Second Chance. You are attacking unarmed civilians. I am asking you one time to stand down and leave this system." There was no response, only silence. Sam raised an eyebrow. "Didn't think that would work, did you?" "Nope," Maria said. "But now if anyone's watching, they know we tried talking first." On the Solène, Edith watched the exchange with wide eyes. She turned to her officer. "Did the enemy ever respond to any of our messages?" "No, Captain, not once. They never speak. They only attack." Edith's 4 eyes narrowed slightly. "That is strange. Even raiders usually demand something, ask for surrender, threaten us. These ships, they say nothing. They simply kill." Back on the Second Chance, the enemy fleet began to move, slowly at first, then faster, splitting into smaller groups, surrounding the human ship from multiple directions. Their weapons glowed with dark red energy, charging for another attack. "Captain, they're flanking us," Ben said, his voice rising in pitch. 15 ships closing from the left, 20 from the right, the rest are staying back. Maria's eyes moved quickly across the screen, studying the pattern. "They're testing us, trying to see how we react before committing everything." "Should we run?" Ben asked. "No," Maria said. "If we run, they go straight back to finishing off the Velkari ships. We hold here, we buy time." Sam moved to the weapons station, cracking his knuckles. "Time for what exactly?" Maria allowed herself a small, tight smile. "Time for backup." She pressed a button on her console, sending a wide distress and status signal back toward human space. A simple message. Engaged with unknown hostile fleet. 50+ ships, requesting nearest available support. It was not a call for panic. It was routine procedure. But even sending it felt strange, because deep down, Maria knew that help might not arrive in time. The enemy ships surged forward. "Here they come," Ben shouted. "Evasive pattern Delta," Maria ordered, her voice sharp now. All business. Ben's hands flew across the controls, and the Second Chance dove sharply downward, dodging a wave of red energy beams that tore through the space where the ship had been only a second before. The ship shook as a few beams grazed the shields, but it held together, spinning gracefully between the incoming attacks like a dancer moving through a storm of knives. "Shields at 90%, Sam called out, watching his screen. "Not bad. Whatever they're shooting, it's strong, but our shields can take a beating." "Return fire," Maria said. Sam's fingers moved fast, and the second chance fired back, twin beams of bright blue energy shooting from its underside, striking one of the enemy ships directly in its side. The enemy ship shook, sparks flying from the impact point, but it did not explode. It did not even slow down. "Direct hit, Captain, but their armor held," Sam reported, frowning. "Whatever they're made of, it's tough." Maria's eyes narrowed. "Then we hit them again, harder." The battle raged on. The second chance twisted and turned through space, dodging beam after beam, firing back whenever it found an opening. Explosions lit up the darkness like fireworks, but grim, deadly fireworks, not meant for celebration. Every few seconds, the ship shook from a near miss, and Ben gritted his teeth, sweat pouring down his face as he fought to keep the ship alive. On the Solène, Edith and her crew watched the battle unfold on their screens, stunned into silence. They had expected the human ship to either turn and run, or to be destroyed within minutes. Instead, the small vessel danced through 50 enemy ships like it had been built for exactly this kind of fight. "It's incredible," the young officer whispered. "One ship holding off an entire fleet." Ayeth said nothing. She simply watched, her heart pounding, unable to look away. Back in the fight, Sam's console beeped loudly. "Captain, shields at 60%. We're taking more hits than we're landing. Their numbers are wearing us down." Maria's jaw tightened. She had known this would not be easy. 50 ships against one meant that no matter how skilled her crew was, the math was simply against them. But retreat was not an option, not while 5 Velkari ships full of families sat helpless behind her. "Sam, charge the ion cannon." Sam's eyes widened slightly. "Captain, that thing eats half our power reserve if we use it now." "Charge it," Maria repeated, calm but firm. Sam nodded and began the process, his hands moving quickly across a separate console. A low humming sound began to build inside the ship, growing louder, more intense, like a giant breathing in before a shout. "Ben, get us to the center of their formation," Maria ordered. Ben's eyes went wide. "Captain, that's the most dangerous spot. We'll be surrounded on all sides." "Exactly," Maria said. "The ion cannon has a wide blast radius. If we're in the center when it fires, we hit the most ships possible." Ben swallowed hard but nodded, pushing the ship forward, straight into the heart of the enemy formation. Explosions rocked the second chance from every direction as it dove deeper into danger. Alarms blared, warning lights flashed red across every console, but the ship held together, pushed forward by Ben's steady hands and Maria's unshaken resolve. "We're in position," Ben shouted. "Cannon at 80%. "Almost there," Sam called back, watching the charge meter climb. The enemy ships closed in tighter, sensing the human ship was now surrounded, trapped. They began to slow down, almost as if savoring the moment, believing victory was finally within reach. "Cannon at 95%, Sam said, his voice tight with tension. The enemy ships opened fire from all directions at once, dozens of red beams converging toward the tiny human vessel trapped in the center. "Now!" Maria shouted. Sam slammed his hand down on the console. "Firing!" A blinding white light erupted from the second chance, spreading outward in a massive wave of pure energy. The wave rushed outward, faster than the incoming enemy beams, faster than anything the enemy fleet had ever seen. It swept through the enemy formation like a tidal wave crashing over sand castles. Ship after ship shook violently as the wave struck them. Some enemy vessels went dark instantly, their power completely drained. Others spun out of control, their engines destroyed. A few, caught closest to the blast, broke apart entirely, torn to pieces by the sheer force of the attack. When the light faded, nearly 20 enemy ships floated lifeless in space, destroyed or disabled. The remaining 30 pulled back in confusion, their formation broken, their confidence shaken. On the bridge of the second chance, alarms still blared, but softer now, less urgent. Sam checked his console with wide eyes. "Captain, we just took out almost half their fleet in one shot." Maria let out a slow breath, allowing herself a moment to feel the tension in her shoulders. Status report. Shields at 20%, Ben reported. Power reserves nearly empty. We can't do that again, Captain. Not for a while. Maria nodded slowly, watching the remaining enemy ships regroup at a distance, clearly unsure of what to do next. That's fine. We don't need to do it again. We just needed to make them think twice. On the Solène, the entire bridge erupted into stunned whispers. The young officer turned to Ieth, his 4 eyes wide with disbelief. Captain, did you see that? One single ship just destroyed almost half of an entire fleet. Ieth stared at the screen, her hands trembling slightly. Not from fear this time, but from something else. Something like awe. The stories, she whispered. The old stories about Deathworlders. I always thought they were exaggerated, made bigger with every retelling, but now I wonder if they were even big enough. Far from the battlefield, deep within the wreckage of one of the enemy ships, something stirred. A single enemy vessel, damaged but not destroyed, floated silently at the edge of the fight. Inside, in the darkness, a strange console blinked to life, sending a message far, far away to someone or something that the galaxy had not yet seen. The message was simple, cold, and full of dread. Deathworlder confirmed. Strength exceeds all previous reports, requesting immediate reinforcement. The primary target must not reach the human homeworld alive. Back at the battlefield, the remaining 30 enemy ships regrouped, forming a tighter, more cautious formation. No longer careless, no longer confident. They had learned, in the worst way possible, that this single human ship was not an easy kill. On the second chance, Maria watched the enemy regroup, her eyes narrowing slightly. She turned to Ben. How long until reinforcements arrive? Ben checked his screen. Unknown, Captain. No response yet to our distress call. We might be on our own for a while. Maria looked at the tired faces of her small crew, then out at the battlefield ahead, 30 enemy ships still ready to fight, 5 Velkari ships still trapped and helpless behind her. She took a deep breath, steadying herself. Then we hold the line, she said quietly. For as long as it takes. The enemy fleet began to move again, slower this time, more careful, but still coming, still hungry for the kill they had been denied. The second chance powered up its remaining weapons, preparing for the next wave, its crew exhausted but unwilling to back down. On the Solène, Ieth watched the human ship brace itself for another attack, and for the first time since the nightmare began, she felt something she had not expected to feel. Hope. Real hope. The kind that comes only when you witness something truly extraordinary. Send a message to every ship in our fleet, Ieth said, her voice steady now. Tell everyone to hold on. Tell them help has truly arrived. As the enemy ships closed in for another attack, the second chance stood its ground, small, damaged but unbroken, a single Deathworlder ship against the remains of an enemy fleet that no one in the galaxy had ever seen before, and no one yet understood. Far away across the stars, something vast and terrible had just received a warning about the humans, and it was already beginning to move. The stars did not care about the battle below them. They simply watched, cold and silent, as 30 enemy ships moved forward once again, slower now, more careful, like wolves who had just learned their prey had teeth. On the bridge of the second chance, Maria Reyes stood with her arms crossed, watching the enemy formation on her screen. Her ship was damaged, tired, running low on power, but it was still standing, still ready. They're not rushing in anymore, Sam said, studying the enemy movements. Smart, whatever they are, they learned from last time. Doesn't matter, Maria said. Smart or not, they're still coming. Ben wiped sweat from his forehead, his hands still shaking slightly from the last battle. Captain, we're at 20% shields. We can't survive another hit like the ion cannon blast. We won't need to, Maria said, though even she was not fully sure of that. Just hold formation. Let them come to us. The enemy ship spread out, forming a wide circle around the battlefield, slowly tightening, like a net closing around a fish. Maria watched carefully, trying to understand their strategy. But there was something strange about it. Something that did not feel like normal military tactics. Sam, scan their ships again. Look for anything new. Sam's fingers moved across his console. Scanning. Captain, this is strange. Their ships don't have life support systems like ours. No oxygen, no heating. Nothing a normal crew would need. Maria's eyebrows lifted slightly. No crew? Maybe, Sam said. Or maybe whatever's inside doesn't need oxygen the way we do. On the Solène, Ayeth listened closely as her own science officer reported similar findings. Captain, our scans show something odd about the enemy ships as well. Their hulls are not built like normal metal. It's almost organic, like grown material, not manufactured. Ayeth frowned, her four eyes narrowing in thought. Grown? You mean like a living thing? Possibly, Captain. We have never seen technology like this before. It matches no known species in our records. Fear crept back into Ayeth's chest. Not the fear of dying, but the fear of the unknown. In her long career exploring the stars, she had encountered many strange things, but never something that felt truly alien in this way. Something that did not follow any of the normal rules. Back on the battlefield, the enemy ships suddenly stopped moving. All 30 of them, at the exact same moment, hung perfectly still in space. No sound, no movement, just silence. That's not normal, Ben said quietly. Ships don't move together like that unless they're being controlled by the same mind, Maria finished, her eyes narrowing. A soft beep came from Sam's console. Captain, I'm picking up something big, really big, coming from behind their formation. Maria's stomach tightened. Show me. The screen shifted, zooming out to reveal a massive shape emerging from the darkness far behind the enemy fleet. It was enormous, larger than any ship Maria had ever seen, shaped less like a machine and more like a giant creature made of dark metal and glowing red veins that pulsed slowly, almost like a heartbeat. By the stars, Ben whispered, his face pale. Sam stared at the screen, his usual calm expression gone, replaced by something close to fear. Captain, what is that? Maria's jaw tightened as she studied the massive shape. I don't know, but I don't like it. On the Solène, the entire bridge fell into stunned silence as the same massive shape appeared on their screens. Ayeth's science officer's voice trembled as he spoke. Captain, initial scans suggest this thing that might be the source of the smaller ships, like a hive. The smaller vessels could be extensions of it, not separate ships at all. Ayeth felt a chill run through her entire body. A hive mind, she whispered. That would explain why they never speak, why they never negotiate. They are not soldiers following orders. They are simply parts of something bigger. Back on the second chance, the giant creature ship let out a deep rumbling sound that echoed strangely across the comm channels. Not quite a growl, not quite a mechanical noise, something in between. The 30 smaller enemy ships suddenly moved again, but this time they pulled back, retreating toward the massive shape like children running back to their mother. They're regrouping around it, Ben said, watching the screen closely. Maria's eyes stayed locked on the giant shape. That's the real enemy. Everything before this was just a scout force. Sam let out a slow breath. Great. So we beat the small stuff, and now the big boss shows up. Despite the tension, Maria allowed herself a small, tired smile. Story of my life. The massive creature ship began to move forward, slow and deliberate. The smaller ships gathering around it like a swarm of insects protecting their queen. The red veins across its surface glowed brighter, pulsing faster, as if it was growing excited or angry. Captain, it's opening some kind of channel, Sam said, surprised. First time any of them have tried to communicate. Maria's eyes narrowed. Let's hear it. A strange, distorted sound filled the bridge. Not quite words, not quite language, but somehow, Maria's translation system managed to pull meaning from it. A cold, emotionless voice that sent shivers down everyone's spine. Deathworlder, you have taken what belongs to the swarm, return what is ours, or be consumed with the rest. Ben's eyes went wide. What does that mean? What do they think we took? Maria's mind raced, trying to understand. She turned to the comm channel connecting her to the Velkari fleet. Ayeth, do you know what they're talking about? What could they possibly think we took from them? On the Solene, Ayeth's face went pale as realization dawned on her. The energy signal, she whispered. The reason we came to this system in the first place. We detected a strange energy source and came to study it. We took samples, small pieces of a strange crystal formation nearby. We thought it was just a natural mineral. Maria's stomach dropped. You're saying that crystal might belong to them somehow? I don't know, Ayeth admitted, her voice shaking. But if this creature considers it something precious, something worth chasing down 2 fleets over, it must be far more important than we ever realized. Sam turned to Maria. Captain, orders? Maria thought quickly, weighing their options. Fighting a creature this massive with 30 smaller ships protecting it, and a heavily damaged human vessel with barely any power left, seemed like a losing battle. But retreating would mean leaving the Velkari fleet defenseless once again. Ayeth, Maria said into the comm. Do you still have those crystal samples? Yes, Captain, in secure storage aboard the Solene. Maria's mind worked fast. Then here's what we're going to do. She turned to her crew, her voice steady despite the danger surrounding them. We're going to buy time, Ayeth. Prepare an escape pod with the crystal samples. If we can get that thing away from your fleet, even for a moment, you need to launch that pod in a completely different direction, away from both of our ships. You want to use the crystal as bait? Ayeth asked, surprised. If that thing wants it badly enough to chase down 2 fleets, it'll chase an escape pod too, Maria said. That gives your ships and my ship a chance to regroup, maybe even escape, while it goes after something that isn't actually a threat. Ayeth hesitated for only a moment before nodding. Understood, Captain. Preparing the pod now. While Ayeth's crew scrambled to prepare the escape pod, the giant creature ship continued its slow advance. The pulsing red veins across its surface glowing brighter with each passing second, almost like it could sense something happening, like it was growing impatient. Captain, it's getting closer, Ben warned, his hands tight on the controls. Should we retreat? Not yet, Maria said, watching the distance carefully. We need to draw it just a little closer, give Ayeth's crew enough time. The massive ship let out another deep rumbling sound, and this time several of the smaller enemy ships broke away from the group, moving directly toward the second chance, clearly done with waiting, done with talking. Here they come again, Sam said, gripping his weapons console tightly. Evasive maneuvers, Maria ordered. Keep us moving, don't let them box us in again. Ben guided the ship through a series of quick, sharp turns, dodging the incoming enemy vessels as they opened fire once more. The battle resumed, energy beams flashing across the darkness, the second chance weaving between attacks with skill built from years of dangerous missions. On the Solene, Ayeth watched anxiously as her crew finished preparing the escape pod. Pod is ready, Captain. Crystal samples secured inside. Launch it now, Maria said through the comm, her voice tight with focus as she dodged another incoming attack. Send it in the opposite direction, far from both our fleets. Ayeth gave the order, and moments later, a small pod shot away from the Solene, rocketing off into the darkness of space in a completely different direction, carrying with it the strange crystal that had somehow started this entire nightmare. The massive creature ship's movement suddenly changed, its pulsing red veins flared brightly, and the deep rumbling sound grew louder, almost desperate. It turned sharply, abandoning its slow advance toward the 2 fleets, and surged forward with surprising speed, chasing after the escape pod instead. It's working, Ben shouted, watching the massive shape change direction. It's going after the pod. The remaining smaller enemy ships hesitated for a moment, clearly confused, before several of them broke away to follow their massive leader, chasing the escape pod deeper into the darkness of space. Maria let out a slow breath of relief, though she knew the danger was far from over. Sam, status on the remaining enemy ships near us? Sam checked his console quickly. Still about 10 ships left near our position, Captain. The rest are chasing the pod. Then let's finish this, Maria said, turning back toward the remaining threat with renewed determination. On the Solene, Iyeth watched the massive creature ship disappear into the distance, chasing the empty pod, her heart pounding with a strange mix of relief and dread. "It worked," she whispered. "But for how long?" Her science officer, still staring at his screen, spoke up nervously. "Captain, I'm reading something troubling. That crystal, the one inside the pod. Our scans show it was giving off some kind of energy signature, almost like a heartbeat. Almost like it was alive." Iyeth's eyes widened. "Alive? You think that creature ship was chasing something living?" "I don't know for certain, Captain, but if that's true..." The officer's voice trailed off, unable to finish the thought. Back on the battlefield, Maria and her crew continued fighting off the remaining smaller ships, each explosion lighting up the darkness like distant fireworks. The Second Chance was battered, its shields nearly gone, its power reserves critically low, but it held on, refusing to fall. As the last of the nearby enemy ships were finally destroyed or driven away, Maria allowed herself a brief moment to breathe. She looked out at the empty space where the massive creature ship had disappeared, chasing the pod into the unknown darkness. "Captain," Ben said quietly, "what happens when it catches that pod and realizes there's nothing inside but rocks?" Maria's expression grew serious, her eyes still fixed on the distant darkness. "Then it's going to come back," she said slowly. "And next time, it's going to be a whole lot angrier." Far away, in the depths of space, the massive creature ship finally caught up to the small escape pod. Its red veins pulsed violently as it reached out with strange, dark tendrils. Pulling the pod close, for a moment everything was still. Then a deep, furious roar echoed across the emptiness of space, a sound so powerful it seemed to shake the very stars themselves. The creature ship had discovered the truth, and it was far from pleased. Back on the Second Chance, every alarm on the ship suddenly began blaring at once. Sam's eyes went wide with alarm as he stared at his console. "Captain, something huge just happened. Energy readings are off the charts. It's coming back, and it's coming back fast." Maria's eyes narrowed as she stared out into the darkness, watching for the first signs of the creature ship's return. "Everyone, brace yourselves," she said quietly. "This fight isn't over yet." The darkness of space trembled. Far in the distance, a deep red glow grew brighter with every passing second, like a wound tearing open across the stars. The massive creature ship was returning, and it was not returning slowly this time. On the bridge of the Second Chance, every screen flashed with warnings. Sam stared at his console, his face pale. "Captain, energy readings are 3 times higher than before. Whatever that thing is, it's angry, and it's fast." Maria stood firm, her eyes locked on the growing red light in the distance. "Ben, status on our engines?" "Barely holding together, Captain," Ben said, sweat dripping down his face. "We used almost everything we had in the last fight. I don't know if we can outrun it, let alone fight it." Maria's mind raced. She had faced dangerous enemies before, pirates, rogue soldiers, even a few strange creatures on hostile planets. But nothing like this. Nothing this big, this powerful, this determined. On the Solene, Iyeth watched the same red glow approaching on her own screens, her hands trembling slightly. "Science officer, tell me you have some good news." The officer shook his head slowly. "I'm afraid not, Captain. That thing is moving at a speed that shouldn't be possible for something its size. It will reach us in under 2 minutes." Iyeth closed her eyes for a moment, gathering her courage. She turned to the open comm channel connecting her ship to the Second Chance. "Captain Reyes, what do we do now?" Maria's voice came through, steady despite the danger. "We're not going to win this by fighting head-on. That thing is too strong, too fast. We need to think smarter, not harder. What do you suggest?" Iyeth asked. Maria studied the battlefield, her mind working quickly. "Sam, pull up everything we scanned from that creature ship earlier. Any weakness, any pattern, anything at all." Sam's fingers flew across his console. "Checking now, Captain. Wait, here's something. Those red veins across its body, they pulse in a pattern, almost like a heartbeat. And every time they pulse, there's a tiny drop in its shield energy. Maria's eyes narrowed with interest. A weak point. Maybe, Sam said, but it's a small window. We'd have to hit it at exactly the right moment. The massive creature ship grew closer, its red glow now filling a large portion of the front window. The remaining smaller ships that had survived the earlier battle regrouped around it once again, forming a protective shield of smaller vessels around their massive leader. "Captain, it's slowing down," Ben said, watching the screen carefully. I think it's preparing to attack." Maria took a deep breath. "Everyone, hold steady. We only get one shot at this." The creature ship let out another deep, rumbling roar, and suddenly, dozens of dark tendrils shot out from its massive body, stretching across space like whips made of shadow. Each tendril crackled with dark energy, and where they struck the empty space around them, small explosions of red light burst outward. "Evasive maneuvers," Maria shouted. Ben pulled hard on the controls, and the second chance dove sharply, narrowly avoiding one of the massive tendrils as it whipped through the space where the ship had been only a moment before. The ship shook violently from the force of the near miss, alarms blaring louder than ever. "Shields at 10%, Sam shouted over the noise. "One more hit like that and we're finished." Maria gritted her teeth watching the creature ship's pulsing red veins carefully, waiting, timing her next move. "Sam, get ready. The moment those veins pulse again, hit it with everything we've got left." Sam's hands hovered over the weapons console, watching the creature's veins closely. The red glow dimmed slightly, then began to brighten again, building toward another pulse. "Almost there," Sam whispered. "Almost." The veins flashed bright red, and in that exact moment, Sam slammed his hand down on the console, firing. A single focused beam of blue energy shot from the second chance, cutting through space and striking the creature ship directly at the peak of its pulse. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the massive creature let out an ear-splitting shriek, a sound so loud and painful that it seemed to shake the very fabric of space itself. "Direct hit." Ben shouted. "Its shields just dropped by almost 30%. On the Selene, Ayeth watched in amazement as the massive creature recoiled from the attack, its red veins flickering wildly, clearly injured. "Captain Reyes, whatever you just did, it worked. Keep it up." But the creature ship did not retreat. Instead, its roar grew even louder, more furious, and the smaller ships surrounding it surged forward all at once, no longer holding back, no longer cautious. "Captain, we've got incoming from all directions." Ben shouted. "I can't dodge everything at once." Maria's eyes scanned the battlefield quickly, calculating their odds. They were low on power, low on shields, and now facing a furious, wounded enemy along with a dozen smaller ships all attacking at once. The situation looked impossible. But then, something unexpected happened. A bright flash of light appeared at the edge of the battlefield, followed by another, and another. Sam's console beeped rapidly as new signals appeared on the radar. "Captain, we've got new contacts. Multiple ships approaching fast." Maria's heart skipped a beat. Friendly or hostile? Sam checked quickly, his eyes widening with relief. "Friendly, Captain. It's a full human fleet. Looks like our distress call finally got through." Ben let out a breath of pure relief. About time, 5 human warships emerged from hyperspace, larger and far more heavily armed than the second chance. They wasted no time, immediately opening fire on the smaller enemy ships surrounding the massive creature. Explosions lit up the battlefield as the newly arrived fleet tore through the enemy formation with practiced precision. On the Selene, Ayeth's science officer nearly fell out of his chair in shock. "Captain, look! More human ships! They're incredible. The enemy ships are falling apart under their attacks." Ayeth stared at the screen, watching the battle turn in their favor, her 4 eyes wide with disbelief. "The stories," she whispered again, shaking her head slowly. "Every single story we ever heard about the Deathworlders, I think we finally understand why they were never exaggerated enough." With the arrival of reinforcements, the tide of the battle shifted dramatically. The remaining smaller enemy ships, already weakened from the earlier fights, began falling one by one under the combined firepower of the human fleet. Some tried to retreat, pulling back toward the wounded creature ship, but even retreat proved difficult as the human ships pressed their advantage. The massive creature ship, now surrounded by fewer than 10 of its smaller ships, let out another furious roar, its red veins pulsing wildly, clearly enraged by the sudden turn of events. It turned its attention toward the newly arrived human fleet, tendrils lashing out wildly in every direction. One of the larger human warships, the Iron Resolve, took a direct hit from one of the tendrils, its hull sparking from the impact, but it did not retreat. Instead, it fired back with a massive cannon built into its front section, striking the creature directly in its already wounded side. The creature shrieked again, louder this time, and for the first time since the battle began, it began to pull back, its massive form retreating slowly into the darkness of space, the remaining smaller ships following closely behind it, clearly deciding that this fight was no longer worth the cost. "It's retreating," Ben shouted, disbelief clear in his voice. "Captain, it's actually retreating." Maria allowed herself a tired smile, watching the massive creature disappear into the darkness. "Good. Let it run. Let it tell whatever's out there that humans don't go down easy." As the last of the enemy ships vanished from sight, the battlefield finally fell quiet. The 5 human warships regrouped around the Second Chance and the Velkari fleet, forming a protective formation, ready for any sign of the enemy's return. On the Solene, Edith finally allowed herself to relax, sinking back into her chair with a long, exhausted breath. "Send a message to Captain Reyes," she said to her officer. Tell her the Velkari owe the humans a debt that can never be repaid." The officer nodded and quickly relayed the message. A moment later, Maria's voice came through the comm, tired but warm. "Tell your captain there's no debt here. We help because it's the right thing to do, that's all." Hyeth smiled softly at the response, shaking her head in quiet amazement. Simple words, she murmured to herself. From a species capable of such incredible power, simple, humble words. As repair crews from the newly arrived human fleet began assisting the damaged Velkari ships, Maria finally allowed her exhausted body to relax in her chair. Sam walked over, handing her a cup of something warm. "You did good, Captain." Maria took the cup gratefully, taking a slow sip before responding. "We all did good, Sam. Every single one of us." Ben, still shaking slightly from the intense battle, managed a tired laugh. "Remind me never to volunteer for another rescue mission again." Sam chuckled, patting the young pilot on the shoulder. "You say that every time, Ben." Despite the exhaustion, despite the danger they had just survived, there was a quiet sense of victory in the air. They had answered a call for help, faced down an enemy fleet and even something far stranger and more powerful than anyone had expected, and they had survived. But far away, deep within the darkness of space, the wounded creature ship continued its retreat, its red veins pulsing weakly, carrying with it a message of failure back to whatever, or whoever, had sent it in the first place. Somewhere out there, in the deepest, coldest parts of the galaxy, something far larger than a single wounded creature was about to learn a very important lesson about the small blue world called Earth, and the humans who called it home. On the bridge of the Second Chance, Maria stared out at the stars, her tired eyes reflecting the distant lights. She had no way of knowing it yet, but this small rescue mission, this single moment of answering a desperate call for help, was about to change everything. Not just for the Velkari, but for the entire galaxy watching from the shadows. 3 days had passed since the battle, and the small stretch of space near the Velkar cluster was calm again. The wreckage of enemy ships still floated silently in the dark, slowly drifting apart, pieces of dark, thorn-shaped metal turning end over end like broken toys forgotten by a giant child. The Selene, though badly damaged, had survived. Repair crews from the human fleet had spent 2 full days patching holes in its hull, replacing burned wires, and helping the exhausted Velkari crew get their systems working again. The Second Chance floated nearby, still worn and scarred from the fight but proud like an old soldier who had earned every mark on its hull. Inside the Selene's main hall, a large gathering had formed. Velkari scientists, families, and crew members stood together, quiet and respectful, as Captain Eeth Doral prepared to speak. Beside her stood Maria Reyes, arms crossed, looking a little uncomfortable with all the attention pointed her way. She cleared her throat, her four eyes moving slowly across the crowd before settling on Maria. 3 days ago, she began, her voice steady and clear. We were minutes away from death. Our ships were broken, our weapons useless, our hope nearly gone. We did something none of our people had done in generations. We called the humans. We called the Deathworlders. A soft murmur passed through the crowd, some Velkari shifting uncomfortably at the old feared word. Ayeth continued. For as long as any of us can remember, our stories painted the humans as monsters, as a species so dangerous that even calling upon them was considered worse than death itself. We believed that if we ever needed their help, it would come at a terrible price. She paused, looking directly at Maria now. But that is not what happened. Instead, a single ship, badly outnumbered, fought off an enemy fleet to protect complete strangers. And when reinforcements arrived, they did not ask for payment. They did not demand anything from us, they simply helped. Maria shifted slightly, clearly not used to being the center of such attention. We just did what needed doing, she said quietly. Anyone would have done the same. Ayeth shook her head slowly, a small smile forming on her face. No, Captain Reyes, not anyone would have done the same. That is exactly the point. The crowd erupted into quiet applause, a mixture of relief, gratitude, and something deeper. Respect earned through actions, not stories. Ayeth turned back to her people, raising her voice once more. Let it be known, from this day forward, that the old fears many of us carried about the humans were built on incomplete truths. Yes, they are powerful. Yes, they come from a world so dangerous it shaped them into something few species can match. But power alone does not define them. Their choice to use that power to protect the weak, that is what truly matters. Far away, in a quiet corner of the galaxy few dared to visit, a massive space station floated silently among the stars. Its halls were lit by dim, cold light, and inside, dozens of different alien species moved quietly between rooms filled with old records, ancient maps, and forgotten histories. This place was known simply as the Archive, a neutral meeting ground where representatives from many galactic powers gathered to share information and discuss matters that affected the wider galaxy. In one of the private chambers, a tall, thin alien named Chancellor Vex of the Trinari Alliance sat quietly, reviewing reports on a glowing screen. His skin was a pale blue, his eyes sharp and calculating, a leader known throughout the galaxy for his careful, cautious nature. Beside him sat two other representatives, each from different corners of the galaxy, drawn together by the same startling news. You've all seen the reports by now, Vex said, his voice calm but serious. A single human vessel held off an enemy fleet of 50 ships, including something the Velkari described as a massive organic creature ship, unlike anything in our records. One of the representatives, a short, round alien named Torek, shook his head in disbelief. I read the report 3 times. I still find it hard to believe. 1 ship, Chancellor. 1. And reinforcements arrived within the hour, added the third representative, a sharp-featured alien named Yeska, her voice tight with concern. An entire fleet ready for battle. That kind of response time suggests the humans have far more military strength positioned nearby than any of us previously believed. Vex leaned back in his chair, his sharp eyes narrowing in thought. For decades, we have treated human space as something to avoid, a dangerous area best left alone. We assumed their reputation was built mostly on old fears and exaggerated stories passed down through generations. This report suggests otherwise. Torek frowned. So what do we do with this information? Vex was quiet for a long moment before answering. Nothing. For now. We watch. We learn. We do not provoke a species capable of what we just witnessed. The galaxy has operated for centuries without seriously involving the humans in wider affairs. Perhaps it is wise to continue doing exactly that. Yeska nodded slowly, though her expression remained troubled. There is something else in the report that concerns me even more than the human's strength. The creature ship, Vex said quietly. Yes, Yeska confirmed. None of our records match its description. No known species builds ships like that. Organic material, hive-like behavior, a single mind controlling many smaller vessels. If something like that exists, and it is powerful enough to hunt for a specific crystal formation across star systems, we may be dealing with something far more dangerous than we first realized. The room fell silent for a moment, each representative considering the weight of that statement. Finally, Vex spoke again, his voice low. Then, perhaps, for the first time in a long while, having the Deathworlders standing between us and whatever that creature represents might not be the worst thing for this galaxy. Back near the Velkar cluster, repairs were finally complete. The Solen and its fleet prepared to make the long journey home, escorted partway by 2 of the human warships as a precaution. Eoth stood at the entrance of the Solen's docking bay, watching as Maria and her small crew prepared the second chance for departure. "You didn't have to stay these 3 days," Eoth said, walking up beside Maria. "Your fleet could have left once reinforcements arrived." Maria shrugged, checking a final panel on her ship's hull. "Figured we'd make sure you got back on your feet properly. Wouldn't feel right leaving the job half-finished." Eoth studied the human captain for a long moment. "May I ask you something, Captain Reyes?" "Sure. Why did you come? Truly, your people have no history with mine, no treaty, no alliance. We are practically strangers. Yet you risked everything, your ship, your crew, your own life, for people you had never met." Maria paused, considering the question carefully before answering. "Where I come from? Help isn't something you save for people you already know. It's something you give because someone needs it. That's it? That's the whole reason." Eoth's eyes softened. Such a simple answer for such a complicated action. Maria smiled slightly. "Most good things usually are simple, once you strip away all the noise." Sam approached from behind, carrying a final crate of supplies onto the ship. "Captain, we're all set. Ready when you are." Maria nodded, turning back to Eoth one last time. "Take care of your people, Captain Doral, and if you ever need help again—" "I know where to call," Eoth finished, a small, genuine smile forming on her face, "though I hope for both our sakes that it won't be necessary again anytime soon." "Same here," Maria said, extending her hand in the human gesture of friendship. Eoth looked at it for a moment, unfamiliar with the custom, before carefully copying the motion. Gripping Maria's hand gently, "Safe travels, Captain Reyes." "You too, Captain Doral." With that, Maria turned and boarded the second chance, her tired but satisfied crew waiting inside. As the ship's engines hummed to life, Eoth stepped back, watching through the docking bay window as the small, scarred human vessel pulled away, joining the rest of the human fleet as they prepared to depart. Weeks later, far across the galaxy, in a quiet human settlement built along the edge of a peaceful green valley, news of the rescue had spread quietly through certain military and diplomatic circles. Nothing flashy, no grand celebration, just quiet acknowledgement among those who understood the importance of what had happened. In a small office overlooking the valley, an older man named Admiral James Whitfield reviewed the final report on his desk, reading through the details of Maria's mission for the 3rd time. His assistant, a young woman named Officer Reina Torres, stood nearby, waiting patiently. "Quite the story," Whitfield said finally, setting the report down. "Alien fleet, mysterious creature ship, entire species learning to look at us differently, all from one small rescue mission." "Captain Reyes always did have a knack for finding trouble," Reina said with a small smile. Whitfield chuckled softly. "Trouble finds us, Officer Torres. We just happen to answer when it calls." He paused, his expression growing more serious. "This creature ship concerns me, though. If it's out there hunting for something as specific as that crystal, there's likely more to this story we haven't uncovered yet." "Should we increase patrols along that sector?" Reina asked. "Quietly," Whitfield said, nodding slowly. "No need to alarm anyone, but keep a closer watch. If whatever that creature represents decides to return, I want us ready." Reina nodded, making a note before glancing back at the report. "And Captain Reyes? Any special recognition for her actions?" Whitfield allowed himself a small smile. Reyes doesn't care much for medals or recognition, Officer Torres. She'll be happy enough knowing everyone made it home safe. That's reward enough for people like her. Back aboard the Second Chance, now safely traveling through familiar human space, Maria sat quietly in her chair, watching the stars drift peacefully outside her window. Ben sat nearby, finally relaxed after days of tension, sipping a warm drink, while Sam tinkered lazily with a small device in the corner, humming his usual quiet tune. "You ever think about it?" Ben asked suddenly. Breaking the comfortable silence, Maria glanced over. "Think about what?" "That creature ship," Ben said. "What it really was. Where it came from. Why it wanted that crystal so badly." Maria was quiet for a moment, staring out at the endless stars. "Yeah," she admitted. "I think about it." "You think we'll see it again?" Ben asked. Maria's expression grew thoughtful. "Something that big, that determined, doesn't just give up after one loss." "Yeah, Ben, I think we'll see it again. Question is when, and whether we'll be ready." Sam looked up from his tinkering, a small, confident smile on his face. "Well, whenever it decides to show up again, it'll learn the same lesson twice. Humans don't scare easy, and we definitely don't run." Maria allowed herself a small smile, nodding slowly in agreement. "No," she said quietly, turning back to look out at the stars. "We definitely don't." Far behind them, deep in the unexplored darkness of space, something massive and wounded continued its slow retreat, carrying with it a warning about a small blue world, and the fiercely loyal, unexpectedly kind people who called it home, people the galaxy had once feared simply as Deathworlders, but who were slowly, surely becoming known for something far greater, heroes. And somewhere out there, among the ancient legends and forgotten records of countless galactic civilizations, whispers began to spread once more. Whispers about the day the aliens sent a desperate call for help, and the day humanity answered, not with fear, not with hesitation, but with courage, kindness, and unstoppable strength, forever changing the way the galaxy viewed the small, dangerous, beautiful world called Earth. The end.